Captain Sarah Phoenix. Mitchell gripped the control stick of her F-16 Fighting Falcon as she rolled onto the runway at Air Force Base. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on the tarmac, creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the concrete. In her headset, she could hear the familiar chatter of air traffic control coordinating the morning's training exercises. Today was different, though. Today, she wasn't just another pilot participating in red flag exercises. Today, she was about to prove that everything the old guard believed about women in fighter cockpits was dead wrong. The journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. Sarah grew up in a small farming town in Iowa, where the biggest excitement usually came from the county fair's annual air show. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who flew cargo planes, would take her to watch the Thunderbirds perform their precision maneuvers. While other kids her age were fascinated by the flashy aerobatics, Sarah found herself studying the technical aspects of flight. She would ask detailed questions about thrust-to-weight ratios, G-forces, and weapons systems that left even experienced pilots impressed by her knowledge. When she announced her intention to pursue a career as a fighter pilot during her senior year of high school, the response was predictably mixed. Her guidance counselor suggested she consider more appropriate careers like nursing or teaching. The local Air Force recruiter, while supportive, warned her about the challenges she would face as a woman trying to break into the most male-dominated field in military aviation. Her father, however, simply nodded and said, "Then you'd better be twice as good as everyone else, because they'll be looking for any excuse to wash you out." Those words became her driving force through 4 years at the Air Force Academy. While her male classmates dealt with the usual stresses of military education, Sarah faced additional scrutiny from instructors who seemed determined to find her breaking point. During survival training exercises, she was given heavier packs and longer marches. In academic settings, her contributions to discussions about tactics and strategy were often dismissed or attributed to luck rather than skill. The message was clear. She didn't belong here, and everyone was waiting for her to realize it. But Sarah thrived under pressure. She graduated third in her class, earning a slot in undergraduate pilot training at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma. The transition from classroom theory to actual flight training revealed a natural talent that even her harshest critics couldn't ignore. She soloed earlier than most of her classmates and consistently scored at the top of her class in both navigation and weapons delivery exercises. Her instructor pilots began to take notice, though they were careful to temper their praise with reminders that fighter training would be a different animal entirely. The selection process for fighter training was grueling. Out of her UPT class of 36 pilots, only 8 would earn slots in fighter aircraft. The rest would fly transports, tankers, or bombers. Sarah knew that even earning a fighter slot wouldn't guarantee her a path to the F-16. The Air Force was still debating whether to allow women into combat roles, and the few female pilots who had made it through fighter training found themselves relegated to training squadrons or administrative positions. During the final phase of UPT, Sarah's abilities became impossible to ignore. On a particularly challenging low-level navigation exercise through the mountains of Colorado, weather conditions deteriorated rapidly. Several of her classmates became disoriented in the mountain turbulence and low visibility, requiring emergency vectors back to base. Sarah not only completed the full route, but did so ahead of schedule while maintaining perfect formation with her flight lead. When they landed, her instructor pilot pulled her aside and said something she'd never heard before. "Mitchell, you don't fly like a woman or a man, you just fly like a pilot. A damn good one." The assignment night arrived with typical military ceremony. One by one, her classmates learned their fates. Transports to Germany, tankers to Japan, bombers to North Dakota. When Sarah's name was called, the room fell silent. "F-16s, Air Force Base, Arizona." The applause was polite but muted. Everyone understood what this meant. Sarah would be one of the first women to enter F-16 training, and she would be under a microscope from day one. Air Force Base was known as the home of the fighter pilot. The massive installation in the Arizona desert had been training F-16 pilots for decades, and the culture reflected that heritage. Walking into the 56th Fighter Wing for the first time, Sarah was struck by the wall of portraits showing previous classes of graduates. Hundreds of faces stared back at her, and every single one was male. She was about to change that, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Her first day of introduction to fighter fundamentals began with a briefing from Colonel James Harrison, the wing commander. A veteran of the Gulf War with over 3,000 hours in F-16s, Harrison had a reputation as both an exceptional pilot and a straight shooter. He addressed the class of 12 new students with his usual directness. "Ladies, and you're here because you've proven you can fly. Now you need to learn how to fight. Some of you will excel, some will struggle, and some will wash out. That's not a reflection of your character or your previous achievements. It's simply the nature of this business." His eyes lingered on Sarah for just a moment longer than the others, but his expression was unreadable. After the briefing, he asked her to stay behind. "Lieutenant Mitchell, I want to be clear about something. You'll receive no special treatment here, positive or negative. You'll be evaluated on the same standards as every other pilot who comes through this program. That said, you should know that there are people watching this class very closely. Some want you to succeed, others are waiting for you to fail. My advice is to ignore all of it and focus on becoming the best pilot you can be." The academic phase of F-16 training was intense but manageable. Sarah excelled at systems knowledge, learning the intricate details of the aircraft's radar, weapons, and defensive systems. The F-16 was a marvel of engineering, a single-engine multi-role fighter capable of air-to-air combat, close air support, and precision strike missions. It was also unforgiving of pilot error, with a reputation for demanding constant attention and quick reactions. Her first flight in the F-16 was a revelation. Unlike the trainer aircraft she'd flown in UPT, the Fighting Falcon felt like a living thing. The fly-by-wire flight controls translated her inputs into graceful movements that seemed to anticipate her intentions. The powerful engine pushed her back into her seat during takeoff, and she understood immediately why F-16 pilots talked about strapping on their aircraft rather than climbing into them. Major Rick was assigned as her primary instructor pilot, a decision that raised eyebrows throughout the squadron. was known for his demanding standards and his ability to spot weaknesses in pilot technique that others might miss. He'd washed out more students than any other IP in the squadron, earning him the nickname, the Terminator. When asked why he'd requested Sarah as a student, his answer was typically blunt. Because if she's going to fail, I want to know about it early. And if she's going to succeed, she's going to do it right. Their first training sortie was a basic familiarization flight, designed to let Sarah get comfortable with the aircraft's handling characteristics. As they taxied out to the runway, voice came through the intercom with his standard pre-flight briefing. "Mitchell, today we're going to see what you're made of. I've read your records and I'm impressed by what I see on paper. But papers don't fly airplanes. You ready to show me what you can really do?" Sarah's response was immediate and confident. "Yes, sir, more than ready." The takeoff was smooth, and Sarah quickly adapted to the F-16's responsive controls. They climbed to 15,000 feet over the Arizona training ranges, where began putting her through a series of basic maneuvers. Turns, climbs, descents, and formation flying. Each exercise was designed to test her spatial awareness, G-tolerance, and ability to maintain control under varying conditions. What impressed most wasn't Sarah's technical proficiency, though that was excellent. It was her calmness under pressure and her ability to think ahead of the aircraft. When he called for an unexpected maneuver or simulated an emergency, she responded with the kind of quick thinking that usually took months to develop. By the end of the flight, found himself reassessing his initial skepticism. The debriefing after their first flight set the tone for everything that followed. Was thorough in his critique, pointing out areas where Sarah could improve her technique and efficiency. But he concluded with something that surprised both of them. "Mitchell, that was solid flying for a first ride. You've got good hands and a good head. Don't let anyone tell you different." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the squadron, as it always did in the close-knit world of fighter aviation. Some instructors began to take notice, curious to see if her initial promise would hold up under more challenging conditions. Others remained skeptical, convinced that the real test would come when weapons training began and the pace of instruction intensified. The basic flying phase progressed rapidly. Sarah mastered air-to-air intercepts, learning to use the F-16's radar to track and engage simulated enemy aircraft. She excelled at air-to-ground weapons delivery, consistently hitting targets with both conventional bombs and precision-guided munitions. Her formation flying was crisp and professional, maintaining perfect position even during aggressive maneuvering. But it was during air combat maneuvering training that Sarah truly began to shine. ACM, or dogfighting, was considered the ultimate test of a fighter pilot's skill and instincts. It required split-second decision-making, precise aircraft control, and the ability to think in 3 dimensions while pulling multiple. Many excellent pilots struggled with ACM, finding the dynamic nature of aerial combat overwhelming. Sarah took to it like a natural. Her spatial awareness was exceptional, allowing her to track multiple aircraft while maintaining situational awareness of her own position and energy state. More importantly, she demonstrated the kind of aggressive mindset that successful fighter pilots needed. She pressed attacks when she had advantages and defended skillfully when caught in disadvantageous positions. During one particularly memorable training flight, Sarah found herself in a 2 versus 1 scenario against two experienced instructor pilots. The odds were heavily stacked against her, and the exercise was designed more to test her defensive skills than her offensive capabilities. But Sarah surprised everyone by using superior energy management and tactical thinking to separate her opponents and engage them individually. She successfully shot down both instructors, earning grudging respect from pilots who had been flying F-16s since before she was born. The incident became legendary in the squadron, not just because of Sarah's performance, but because of how she handled the victory. Instead of celebrating or boasting about her success, she approached both instructor pilots after the flight to thank them for the training and ask for advice on how she could improve. That humility, combined with her obvious skill, began to win over even her harshest critics. As the weeks passed, Sarah's reputation grew. She was consistently at the top of her class in all phases of training, but more importantly, she was becoming respected as a pilot regardless of gender. Her classmates, initially skeptical or protective, began to treat her as simply another member of the team. The instructors found themselves evaluating her based on her performance rather than their preconceptions. The first real test of Sarah's resolve came during night air-to-air training. Night flying in fighters was challenging enough, but adding the complexity of aerial combat made it exponentially more difficult. The human eye's limitations in darkness, combined with the disorientation that could come from rapid maneuvering, had claimed the lives of many experienced pilots over the years. Sarah approached night flying with the same methodical preparation she brought to all aspects of training. She studied night vision physiology, practiced spatial disorientation recovery techniques, and spent extra time in the simulator working on night intercept procedures. Her first night ACM sortie was scheduled against an instructor pilot known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to exploit any weakness he detected. The fight began at 20,000 feet over the darkened Arizona desert. Sarah's opponent immediately pressed an attack, using the darkness to mask his approach until the last possible moment. For most student pilots, the combination of darkness, G-forces, and the aggressive tactics would have been overwhelming. Sarah not only held her own, but began to turn the tables on her instructor. Using her radar skillfully and managing her aircraft's energy state, she maneuvered into a position where she could engage with her simulated missiles. The instructor, surprised by her aggressive counterattack, found himself on the defensive for the first time in the engagement. The fight continued for several more minutes, with both pilots pushing their aircraft and themselves to the limits. When the exercise concluded, both aircraft returned to base with Sarah having scored multiple simulated kills against an opponent with 20 years of experience. The debriefing was unusually quiet, with the instructor pilot offering only brief comments about her exceptional performance. Later, in the squadron bar, he would tell anyone who would listen, "That girl doesn't just fly the airplane, she thinks with it. I've never seen anything like it." The incident marked a turning point in Sarah's training. The instructors began to push her harder, not because they doubted her abilities, but because they recognized her potential and wanted to help her reach it. They gave her more challenging scenarios, more complex missions, and more responsibility within her class. She responded by continuing to exceed expectations at every opportunity. Advanced training brought new challenges. Sarah learned to employ the F-16's full range of capabilities, from beyond visual range missile engagements to close air support missions in complex environments. She mastered low-level navigation through mountainous terrain, night precision bombing, and defensive counter-air tactics. Each phase of training revealed new aspects of her exceptional abilities. The weapons phase was particularly demanding. Sarah had to learn to employ every weapon in the F-16's arsenal, from 20 cannon rounds to advanced air-to-air missiles. Accuracy was paramount, as was the ability to make split-second decisions about weapon selection and employment tactics. Sarah's performance was consistently outstanding, with accuracy scores that placed her among the top graduates in the wing's history. But technical proficiency was only part of what made a successful fighter pilot. The Air Force also emphasized leadership, tactical thinking, and the ability to perform under extreme pressure. Sarah excelled in all these areas, often being selected to lead complex training missions that required coordination between multiple aircraft and different types of weapons systems. Her leadership style was collaborative but decisive. She listened to input from her teammates, considered all available options, and then made clear decisions that everyone could understand and execute. When things went wrong during training missions, as they inevitably did, she remained calm and focused on finding solutions rather than assigning blame. The final phase of F-16 training involved large-scale exercises that simulated real combat conditions as closely as possible. Sarah found herself flying against experienced adversary pilots flying F-5s and other aircraft designed to replicate enemy tactics. These exercises were the ultimate test of everything she had learned, requiring her to apply tactical knowledge, technical skills, and leadership abilities simultaneously. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah was assigned as the flight lead for a four-ship formation tasked with establishing air superiority over a contested area. Intelligence reports indicated the presence of multiple enemy aircraft with unknown capabilities and intentions. The mission required her to coordinate with ground controllers, manage her formation's fuel and weapons states, and make tactical decisions that would determine the success or failure of the entire exercise. The mission began smoothly, with Sarah's formation establishing patrol over the assigned area without contact with enemy forces. But as they settled into their assigned altitudes and began their search patterns, the situation changed rapidly. Ground controllers reported multiple enemy aircraft approaching from several different directions, potentially outnumbering Sarah's formation by more than 2-to-1. Sarah's response demonstrated the tactical thinking that had impressed her instructors throughout training. Rather than trying to engage all the enemy aircraft simultaneously, she divided her formation and used superior positioning to engage the enemy piecemeal. She sent 2 aircraft to intercept the largest group of approaching enemies, while keeping the other wingman with her to deal with any leakers or unexpected threats. The engagement that followed was complex and dynamic, with aircraft maneuvering at high speed and multiple altitudes across hundreds of square miles of airspace. Sarah coordinated her formation's attacks while simultaneously engaging enemy aircraft herself. Her ability to maintain situational awareness while fighting her own battles impressed everyone monitoring the exercise. When the exercise concluded, Sarah's formation had successfully eliminated all enemy aircraft while suffering no losses of their own. The debriefing revealed the exceptional nature of her tactical leadership, with controllers and adversary pilots alike commenting on her ability to manage a complex while maintaining effective control of her formation. Colonel Harrison, who had been monitoring the exercise from the ground, pulled Sarah aside after the debriefing. "Lieutenant Mitchell, in 30 years of flying fighters, I've rarely seen that level of tactical awareness from a student pilot. You have exceptional instincts and the ability to think clearly under pressure. Those are gifts that can't be taught." As graduation approached, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had proven that women could not only fly fighters but excel in roles that had previously been reserved for men. More importantly, she had earned the respect of her instructors and classmates through dedication, skill, and professionalism, rather than through any special consideration or lowered standards. The graduation ceremony was held in the squadron auditorium, with families, friends, and senior officers in attendance. One by one, the surviving members of Sarah's class received their assignments to operational squadrons around the world. Some would go to Europe, others to the Pacific, and a few would remain in the United States for their first operational tour. When Sarah's name was called, Colonel Harrison personally presented her with her assignment. The 388th Fighter Wing at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, one of the Air Force's premier F-16 units with a combat mission and a reputation for excellence. The applause was genuine and sustained, reflecting the respect she had earned from everyone who had witnessed her journey. But even as she celebrated this achievement, Sarah knew that her real test was still ahead. Training was one thing, operational flying was another entirely. In a few weeks, she would report to Hill Air Force Base as the first female F-16 pilot assigned to a combat unit. The spotlight would be brighter than ever, and the pressure to perform would be intense. As she packed her belongings and prepared to leave Air Force Base, Sarah thought about her father's words from years earlier. "You'd better be twice as good as everyone else." She had proven herself to be exactly that during training. Now she would have the opportunity to prove it in the operational world, where the stakes were higher and the margin for error was smaller. The drive from Arizona to Utah gave her time to think about what lay ahead. She would be joining a squadron of experienced combat pilots, many of whom had never flown with a woman before. She would have to earn their trust and respect all over again, proving that her success in training hadn't been a fluke or the result of special treatment. But Sarah was ready for the challenge. She had spent years preparing for this moment, developing not just the technical skills needed to fly the F-16, but the mental toughness and confidence required to succeed in one of the most demanding careers in military aviation. She was no longer the young woman from Iowa who had dreamed of flying fighters while watching air shows. She was now Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, F-16 pilot, ready to take her place among the elite ranks of American fighter pilots. Hill Air Force Base sat nestled against the mountains of northern Utah, its runways stretching across the desert floor like concrete arrows pointing toward the peaks. As Sarah drove through the main gate for the first time, she could see F-16s launching and recovering in the distance, their engines creating the distinctive rumble that had become the soundtrack of her dreams. This was home to the 388th Fighter Wing, known throughout the Air Force as the Wild Ducks, a unit with a combat heritage stretching back to World War II, and a reputation for producing some of the finest fighter pilots in the world. The squadron building of the 4th Fighter Squadron buzzed with activity as Sarah reported for duty on a crisp Monday morning in March. The walls were lined with photographs and memorabilia from decades of operations, telling the story of pilots who had flown everything from P-51 Mustangs to the latest F-16 Block 50 aircraft. Each photograph seemed to watch her as she made her way to the squadron commander's office, their eyes following this newcomer who was about to change the squadron's history forever. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Hawkeye rose from behind his desk as Sarah knocked and entered. A veteran of the Persian Gulf War with over 2,500 hours in F-16s, had a reputation as both a demanding leader and a fair one. His office reflected his personality, organized, professional, and decorated with mementos from a distinguished career that included combat missions over Iraq and peacekeeping operations in the Balkans. "Lieutenant Mitchell, welcome to the Fighting Fourth," said, extending his hand with a firm grip. "I've been reading your training reports and I have to say, they make for impressive reading. Your instructors spoke very highly of your abilities, both as a pilot and as a potential leader." Sarah had prepared for this moment, knowing that first impressions would be crucial in establishing her credibility with the squadron. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here and ready to contribute to the squadron's mission." Gestured for her to take a seat, then leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Mitchell, I'm going to be straight with you about something. You're about to become the first female pilot assigned to this squadron in its 60-year history. That comes with opportunities and challenges that your male counterparts don't face. Some people will expect you to fail. Others will be watching to see if you receive special treatment, and a few will be genuinely curious to see what you can do." He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. "My job is to ensure that you're evaluated fairly and given every opportunity to succeed. Your job is to prove that you belong here through your performance, your attitude, and your contribution to the squadron's mission. Are we clear on that?" "Crystal clear, sir," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Nodded approvingly. "Good. Now let me tell you about your new home. The 4th Fighter Squadron operates 24 F-16C Block 50 aircraft in the suppression of enemy air defenses role. We're tasked with neutralizing surface-to-air missile threats to allow other aircraft to operate safely in contested airspace. It's challenging, dangerous work that requires exceptional pilots with strong tactical knowledge and quick reflexes. He stood and moved to a large map of the Middle East mounted on one wall. We deploy regularly to support operations in Southwest Asia, and we maintain a high state of readiness for contingencies worldwide. Every pilot in this squadron must be capable of leading complex missions in high-threat environments. That's not negotiable, regardless of rank, experience, or any other factor. The briefing continued for another hour, covering squadron procedures, training requirements, and the qualification process that would determine whether Sarah could become mission-ready in her new role. The standards were demanding, requiring proficiency in night operations, air-to-air combat, precision bombing, and the specialized tactics used to defeat advanced surface-to-air missile systems. As concluded the briefing, he handed Sarah a thick folder containing her initial assignments and study materials. You'll start with mission qualification training tomorrow. Captain will be your supervising instructor pilot. He's one of our most experienced aviators with combat time in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Learn from him because he has knowledge that could save your life someday. Sarah's first meeting with Captain Viper took place in the squadron's briefing room, surrounded by tactical charts and intelligence reports from recent operations. Was a compact, intense man with dark eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. His reputation preceded him. Over 200 combat missions, multiple air-to-air kills, and a distinguished flying cross earned during a particularly harrowing mission over Baghdad. "So you're the hotshot from," said without preamble as he looked up from the training syllabus he'd been reviewing. "I've heard the stories about your performance in training. Impressive stuff, but this isn't training anymore. Out here, mistakes don't just cost you points on a grade sheet. They cost lives." His directness was refreshing rather than intimidating. Sarah appreciated working with people who spoke plainly about the realities of their profession. "I understand, sir. I'm here to learn and contribute to the squadron's mission." Studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's see what you're made of. We'll start with basic mission planning and work our way up to complex scenarios. The F-16s we fly here are different from the training birds at. These are configured specifically for the SCAD mission, with additional countermeasures, equipment, and specialized weapons systems." The differences became apparent during Sarah's first flight with. The Block 50 F-16s were indeed more capable than the training aircraft, but they were also more complex. The additional systems required constant attention, and the missions they flew demanded a level of tactical sophistication that surpassed anything Sarah had experienced during training. Their first sortie together was a basic familiarization flight designed to assess Sarah's ability to operate the squadron's specific aircraft configuration. As they climbed out from Hill's runway and headed toward the training ranges in the Utah desert, began a systematic evaluation of her flying skills and tactical knowledge. "Talk me through your threat assessment," instructed as they entered the training airspace. "What systems are you monitoring, and what would you do if we received an RWR indication right now?" Sarah's response was immediate and comprehensive. demonstrating her understanding of the radar warning receiver systems and the appropriate responses to various threat indications. Nodded approvingly, but continued to press her with increasingly complex scenarios, testing not just her knowledge but her ability to think quickly under pressure. The flight progressed through basic maneuvers to simulated combat scenarios, played the role of both instructor and adversary, challenging Sarah to demonstrate her air-to-air capabilities while simultaneously managing the complex systems required for the SEAD mission. By the end of the sortie, he was satisfied that her training had prepared her well for the challenges ahead. The debriefing after their first flight established the pattern for Sarah's mission qualification training. Was thorough in his critiques but fair in his assessments. He identified areas where Sarah could improve her technique while acknowledging her strengths and natural abilities. More importantly, he began to share the kind of tactical knowledge that only came from combat experience. The textbooks will teach you how these systems work, explained as they reviewed radar threat parameters. But combat will teach you how the enemy actually uses them. The difference between those two things is what keeps you alive. Over the following weeks, Sarah's training intensified. She learned to plan and execute complex SEAD missions, coordinating with electronic warfare aircraft, fighter escorts, and ground controllers to neutralize sophisticated air defense systems. The missions required precise timing, careful coordination, and the ability to adapt quickly when situations changed unexpectedly. Her progress was rapid but not without challenges. The SEAD mission demanded a level of tactical thinking that was different from pure air-to-air combat. Success required understanding enemy intentions, predicting their responses, and exploiting weaknesses in their defensive systems. It was as much mental chess as it was flying skill. During one particularly challenging training mission, Sarah found herself leading a four-ship formation against a simulated integrated air defense system. The scenario included multiple surface-to-air missile sites, electronic jamming, and simulated fighter opposition. The complexity of the mission would have challenged even experienced pilots, but it was considered essential training for anyone who might face similar situations in combat. The mission began with detailed planning in the squadron's secure briefing room. Sarah studied intelligence reports, weather forecasts, and tactical considerations while coordinating with the other pilots in her formation. Each aircraft had a specific role in the mission, and success depended on precise execution and seamless coordination between all participants. As they prepared for takeoff, offered some final advice. Remember, the enemy gets a vote in how this mission unfolds. Your plan is just the starting point. Success depends on your ability to adapt when things don't go according to script. The wisdom of his words became apparent shortly after the formation entered the training airspace. The simulated enemy air defense system began tracking their approach earlier than expected, forcing Sarah to modify her attack plan on the fly. She split her formation, sending 2 aircraft on a deception route while she and her wingman approached from a different direction. The tactics worked perfectly. While the enemy radar operators focused on the deception flight, Sarah and her wingman were able to approach undetected and engage the primary surface-to-air missile site with precision-guided weapons. The simulated attack was successful, opening a corridor for follow-on forces to operate safely in the area. But the mission wasn't over. As they egressed from the target area, ground controllers reported the activation of additional missile sites that hadn't been detected during the initial intelligence gathering. Sarah had to make a split-second decision: continue with the planned egress route and risk exposure to the new threats, or modify her route and potentially interfere with other training activities in the area. Her decision demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility that distinguished exceptional pilots from merely good ones. She chose a middle course, adjusting her formation's altitude and heading to minimize exposure to the new threats while avoiding conflicts with other aircraft. The modification required precise navigation and careful coordination with air traffic control, but it allowed her formation to complete the mission successfully. The debriefing for this mission was attended not just but by several senior pilots from the squadron, including the operations officer and the assistant operations officer. The complexity of the scenario and Sarah's successful handling of multiple contingencies had attracted attention throughout the unit. "That was textbook mission leadership," commented Major Gunfighter Williams, the squadron's operations officer. "You demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical flexibility we need in our mission commanders. More importantly, you kept your formation safe while accomplishing the mission objectives." The praise was gratifying, but Sarah understood that she was still early in her qualification process. Each successful mission built confidence and credibility, but she knew that her true test would come when she faced real threats in actual combat. For now, she focused on absorbing as much knowledge as possible from her instructors and preparing herself for whatever challenges lay ahead. As her training progressed, Sarah began to integrate more fully into the squadron's culture. The pilots gradually moved from polite professionalism to genuine acceptance, judging her based on her performance rather than her gender. She participated in the informal discussions about tactics and techniques that were as much a part of fighter-pilot education as formal training flights. The squadron's social dynamics were complex and built around mutual respect earned through demonstrated competence. Sarah found herself included in these discussions not as a novelty or token representative, but as a pilot whose opinions were valued and whose insights contributed to the collective knowledge of the group. One evening after a particularly challenging training mission, several pilots gathered in the squadron's informal lounge area to discuss lessons learned and share experiences from their careers. The conversation ranged from technical details about weapons employment to broader discussions about leadership and decision-making under pressure. "The hardest part about this job isn't the flying," observed Captain Dave Psycho Martinez, a veteran of multiple deployments to Afghanistan. "It's making decisions with incomplete information while people are shooting at you. You can train for that, but you never really know how you'll respond until you're actually in that situation." Sarah listened carefully to these discussions, understanding that they represented a form of education that couldn't be found in any manual or training program. The experienced pilots were sharing hard-won wisdom from real combat operations, and being included in these conversations was both an honor and a responsibility. Her own contributions to these discussions began to carry weight as her knowledge and experience grew. When younger pilots had questions about tactics or techniques, they increasingly sought her input, along with that of the more senior aviators. She was becoming not just another pilot in the squadron, but a resource for others to draw upon. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Sarah was earning her place in the fighter pilot community through the same process that every successful pilot had followed, demonstrating competence, showing good judgment, and contributing to the collective success of the unit. Gender had become irrelevant in the face of proven ability and professional dedication. Her qualification flights continued to challenge her in new ways. Night SEAD missions required a different set of skills than daytime operations, demanding greater reliance on instruments and electronic sensors, while maintaining the same level of tactical awareness. Low-level penetration flights tested her ability to navigate through mountainous terrain at high speed while avoiding simulated radar coverage. Each phase of training revealed new aspects of the F-16's capabilities and the tactical doctrine that governed their employment. Sarah mastered the art of defensive maneuvering against surface-to-air missiles, learning to use chaff, flare, and electronic countermeasures to defeat incoming threats. She became proficient at coordinating with electronic warfare aircraft to create windows of opportunity for precision attacks. But perhaps most importantly, she developed the situational awareness and tactical thinking that separated mission commanders from ordinary pilots. She learned to see the battlefield from multiple perspectives, understanding how her actions affected not just her own formation, but the broader mission objectives and the safety of other friendly forces. The culminating event of her mission qualification training was a large-scale exercise that simulated a complex air campaign against a sophisticated enemy. Sarah was assigned as the mission commander for a package that included not just F-16s, but also electronic warfare aircraft, fighter escorts, and support assets. Success required her to coordinate the actions of more than 30 aircraft while adapting to changing conditions and unexpected threats. The planning phase for this mission consumed most of a week, with Sarah working closely with intelligence specialists, weather forecasters, and representatives from other units to develop a comprehensive attack plan. Every detail had to be considered, from fuel requirements and weapons to contingency plans for various failure modes. As the mission commander, Sarah was responsible not just for her own performance, but for the safety and effectiveness of every aircraft under her control. The weight of that responsibility was both sobering and motivating, representing the kind of leadership challenge that defined the fighter-pilot profession. The mission itself unfolded with the kind of complexity that only large-scale exercises could provide. Equipment failures, weather changes, and simulated combat losses forced Sarah to continuously adapt her plan while maintaining focus on the primary objectives. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and make clear decisions in rapidly changing circumstances impressed even the most experienced observers. When the exercise concluded, Sarah had successfully led her package through a series of challenging scenarios while accomplishing all assigned objectives. More importantly, she had demonstrated the kind of leadership and tactical acumen that the Air Force expected from its mission commanders. The final evaluation meeting for her mission qualification training brought together all of her instructors and several senior officers from the wing. Lieutenant Colonel presided over the session, reviewing Sarah's performance throughout the training period and assessing her readiness for full mission qualification. "Lieutenant Mitchell," began, "you've completed one of the most demanding training programs in the Air Force. Your instructors report that you've demonstrated exceptional flying ability, sound tactical judgment, and strong leadership potential. Based on your performance, I'm certifying you as mission-ready in the F-16C Block 50. The moment was significant not just for Sarah, but for the entire squadron. She had become the first female pilot to complete mission qualification training in the unit, opening a door that had been closed for 60 years. But more than that, she had proven that excellence knew no gender boundaries when it came to flying fighters. Who had been her primary instructor throughout the process, offered his own assessment. "Mitchell, you've got the right stuff for this business. You think clearly under pressure, you fly with precision, and you've earned the respect of everyone in this squadron. That's not easy to do, regardless of who you are or where you came from." As Sarah pinned on the mission-ready patch that signified her new status, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the farm fields of Iowa to the cockpit of one of the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, she had overcome obstacles and exceeded expectations at every step. But she also understood that this achievement was just the beginning. Being mission-ready meant that she was now eligible for deployment to combat zones, where the stakes would be higher than anything she had faced in training. The real test of her abilities would come not in the controlled environment of exercises, but in the chaotic, dangerous world of actual combat operations. That test would come sooner than she expected. Within 2 weeks of completing her mission qualification training, Sarah received orders for deployment to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, where the 4th Fighter Squadron was scheduled to begin a 6-month rotation supporting Operation Southern Watch. The mission involved enforcing the no-fly zone over southern Iraq, a task that brought with it the very real possibility of combat against Iraqi air defense systems and fighter aircraft. As she prepared for her first combat deployment, Sarah knew that everything she had worked for was about to be put to the ultimate test. The training had been challenging, but combat would be unforgiving. Success would require not just technical skill, but courage, judgment, and the ability to perform under pressures that no training program could fully replicate. The night before her departure for Saudi Arabia, Sarah stood on the flight line at Hill Air Force Base, looking at the F-16s silhouetted against the Utah mountains. In a few days, she would be flying similar aircraft over hostile territory, where enemy pilots and missile crews would be doing their best to shoot her down. The thought was both sobering and exhilarating. She was ready for whatever challenges awaited her. The long journey from Iowa farm girl to combat-ready fighter pilot was complete, and she was prepared to prove that American knew no G-Prince Sultan Air Base rose from the Saudi Arabian desert like a modern fortress. Its hardened aircraft shelters and sophisticated air defense systems, a testament to the serious nature of operations conducted from this remote outpost. As Sarah's transport aircraft descended through the shimmering heat toward the runway, she could see F-16s, F-15s, and other coalition aircraft dispersed across the vast expanse of concrete and steel that would be her home for the next 6 months. The heat hit her like a physical blow as she stepped off the aircraft. Even in the early morning hours, temperatures soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the dry desert air seemed to strip moisture from her lungs with each breath. This was the environment where she would prove herself in combat, far from the controlled training ranges of Utah and Arizona. The 4th Fighter Squadron had been operating from Prince Sultan for 2 months when Sarah arrived, flying daily missions over southern Iraq as part of Operation Southern Watch. The no-fly zone enforcement mission had evolved into a complex operation involving multiple coalition partners and requiring constant vigilance against Iraqi air defense systems that remained active despite years of international sanctions. The squadron leader greeted Sarah at the Personnel Processing Center with his characteristic directness. "Welcome to the desert, Mitchell. Hope you're ready to put all that training to use, because things have been heating up lately. The Iraqis have been testing our resolve with increased radar activity and surface-to-air missile movements." The briefing room at Prince Sultan was a study in controlled chaos, with intelligence reports, weather forecasts, and tactical updates competing for wall space alongside mission planning materials and target folders. Sarah quickly learned that combat operations required a level of detail and precision that even the most realistic training exercises couldn't fully replicate. Her first combat mission briefing was conducted by Major Williams, who had deployed with the squadron as the Assistant Operations Officer. The mission was straightforward in concept, but complex in execution. A 4-ship formation would patrol a specific sector of southern Iraq, monitoring for Iraqi air activity while being prepared to respond to any violations of the no-fly zone. Intelligence indicates increased activity around several Iraqi air bases, Williams explained, as she pointed to locations on a large-scale map. "We don't expect them to launch fighters, but we need to be prepared for anything. More likely threats include surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery in the vicinity of known military installations." Sarah studied the intelligence reports with the same attention to detail she had applied to training missions, but she understood that the stakes were fundamentally different now. Every piece of information could be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Enemy capabilities weren't simulated anymore. They were real, and they were designed specifically to shoot down aircraft like hers. The weapons loading process before her first combat mission carried a weight that training sorties had never possessed. Each missile and bomb loaded onto her F-16 was real, not an inert training round. The ordnance technicians performed their tasks with a seriousness that reflected their understanding of the mission's importance, double-checking every connection and safety mechanism. Captain Martinez would serve as her flight lead for this first combat sortie, a role that combined tactical leadership with the responsibility for Sarah's continued education in combat operations. His pre-flight briefing was comprehensive, covering everything from communication procedures to emergency protocols specific to operations over hostile territory. The most important thing to remember, Martinez emphasized as they completed their pre-flight checks, is that this is still flying, just with higher stakes. Trust your training, stay alert, and don't hesitate to ask questions if anything doesn't make sense. We're all here to help each other get home safely. The takeoff from Prince Sultan marked a transition that Sarah would remember for the rest of her career. As her F-16 lifted off from the Saudi runway and turned north toward Iraq, she was no longer a pilot in training or qualification. She was a combat aviator, carrying live weapons into hostile airspace where people would try to kill her if given the opportunity. The flight north toward the Iraqi border provided time to settle into the mission rhythm and review the tactical situation. Sarah monitored her radar and defensive systems while maintaining formation with Martinez and the other two aircraft in their flight. The professional chatter on the radio reflected the routine nature of these patrols for the experienced pilots, but Sarah remained of every system indication and communication. Crossing into Iraqi airspace was marked only by a brief radio call acknowledging their entry into the patrol area. But Sarah felt the psychological weight of flying over enemy territory for the first time. Below her, the desert landscape looked peaceful and empty, giving no indication of the military forces that intelligence reports said were hidden throughout the region. The first hour of patrol passed without significant incident. Sarah's formation established a pattern that allowed them to monitor their assigned airspace, while remaining unpredictable to any Iraqi observers who might be tracking their movements. The routine nature of the patrol allowed her to become comfortable with combat mission procedures, while gradually building confidence in her ability to handle the additional pressures of flying over hostile territory. That comfort was shattered when the radar warning receiver in Sarah's cockpit suddenly activated, indicating that an Iraqi surface-to-air missile system had locked onto her aircraft. The distinctive tone that filled her headset was one she had heard countless times in training, but the knowledge that this was a real threat system made her heart rate spike involuntarily. Viper 2, you're spiked, bearing 270. Martinez's voice was calm, but urgent as he confirmed the threat indication. Execute defensive maneuvers and prepare to deploy countermeasures. Sarah's response was immediate and instinctive, drawing on hundreds of hours of training as she maneuvered her aircraft to break the enemy radar lock. She rolled into a descending turn while dispensing chaff to confuse the incoming radar signals, her movements precise and controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The missile launch that followed was visible as a streak of light rising from the desert floor, its trajectory aimed directly at Sarah's previous position. Had she not executed defensive maneuvers immediately upon detecting the threat, the surface-to-air missile would have found its target. Instead, her quick reaction and proper use of countermeasures caused the weapon to lose track and detonate harmlessly several thousand feet away. "Good reaction, Viper 2," Martinez transmitted as the immediate threat passed. "That's exactly what defensive flying looks like in the real world. Stay alert because they might have more systems in the area." The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds from initial detection to missile detonation, but it marked a fundamental transition in Sarah's development as a combat pilot. She had faced a real threat and responded effectively, proving to herself and her teammates that her training had prepared her for the realities of combat flying. The remainder of the patrol passed without further incident, but Sarah's awareness remained heightened throughout the mission. She understood now that the relatively peaceful appearance of the Iraqi desert was deceptive, concealing air defense systems that posed a constant threat to coalition aircraft operating in the area. The post-mission debrief focused heavily on Sarah's response to the surface-to-air missile threat, with Martinez and the other experienced pilots offering insights that could only come from personal experience with combat operations. Their feedback was uniformly positive, acknowledging that her reaction time and defensive techniques had been exactly what the situation required. "That's how you handle a SAM launch," commented Captain Jennifer Torch, a veteran pilot with over 100 combat missions to her credit. "Quick recognition, immediate reaction, and proper use of countermeasures. The fact that you stayed calm and executed perfectly under fire tells us a lot about your potential as a combat aviator." The validation from experienced combat pilots meant more to Sarah than any training evaluation she had ever received. These were aviators who had faced similar threats countless times, and their assessment carried the weight of hard-won experience. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she could perform effectively when real weapons were being fired at her aircraft. Sarah's second combat mission came 3 days later, this time as part of a larger package involving multiple flights and different aircraft types. The mission was more complex than her first patrol, requiring coordination between F-16s, F-15s, and an airborne warning and control system aircraft that would provide overall tactical coordination. The target for this mission was an Iraqi early warning radar site that had been providing targeting information to surface-to-air missile batteries throughout southern Iraq. Intelligence reports indicated that the site had been rebuilt following previous attacks and was once again operational. Destroying the radar would significantly degrade Iraqi air defense capabilities in a key sector of the no-fly zone. Mission planning for this strike took most of the day before the scheduled launch, with Sarah participating fully in the development of flight routes, timing, and contingency procedures. As a junior pilot, she wasn't expected to lead the planning process, but her input was valued and incorporated into the final mission design. The complexity of coordinating multiple aircraft types against a defended target required precise timing and seamless communication between all participants. Sarah's role was to provide close escort for the strike aircraft while being prepared to engage any Iraqi fighters that might attempt to interfere with the attack. The ingress toward the target area proceeded smoothly, with all flights checking in on schedule and reporting normal systems status. Sarah monitored her radar constantly, searching for any indication of Iraqi fighter activity while maintaining her assigned position relative to the strike aircraft she was escorting. The attack itself was executed with the precision that characterized American military operations. The strike aircraft delivered their weapons exactly on target, destroying the radar site and its associated equipment in a series of controlled explosions that were visible from Sarah's position several miles away. Secondary explosions indicated that ammunition or fuel storage areas had also been hit, ensuring that the site would remain non-operational for an extended period. But the mission wasn't complete with the successful delivery of weapons. The egress from the target area required the same level of coordination and vigilance as the attack phase, with all aircraft maintaining their assigned formations while monitoring for potential threats along the withdrawal route. It was during this egress phase that Sarah encountered her first air-to-air engagement opportunity. The Airborne Warning and Control System aircraft reported two Iraqi MiG-25 interceptors launching from an airbase near Baghdad, apparently attempting to intercept the returning strike package. "All flights be advised, we have two fast movers heading south from airbase," the AWACS controller transmitted. "Estimated intercept with strike package in 12 minutes. Escort flights be prepared to engage." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she realized that she might be about to engage enemy fighters in actual combat. All of her training, from the basic air-to-air maneuvers learned at Air Force Base to the advanced tactics practiced during mission qualification training, had been preparation for this moment. The Iraqi fighters were flying at high altitude and maximum speed, apparently hopping to make a single high-speed pass at the strike aircraft before retreating to the safety of their own airspace. It was a tactic that had been employed successfully during the early phases of Operation Southern Watch, but American pilots had developed effective countermeasures. Martinez, as the flight lead, positioned their formation to intercept the Iraqi fighters before they could reach the strike aircraft. Sarah's role was to maintain formation with Martinez while being prepared to engage with her own weapons if the tactical situation required it. The engagement developed rapidly as the two formations converged at a combined speed of over 1,500 miles per hour. Sarah tracked the lead Iraqi fighter on her radar while Martinez targeted the wingman, preparing to launch medium-range air-to-air missiles as soon as the enemy aircraft came within effective range. Viper flight cleared to engage when in parameters, came the authorization from the mission commander, giving Martinez and Sarah permission to fire when their missiles had the best chance of success. Martinez fired first, launching two AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles at the Iraqi wingman from a range of approximately 30 miles. Sarah followed seconds later, targeting the lead MiG-25 with her own missiles. Both pilots then maneuvered defensively, preparing for the possibility that the Iraqi fighters might have their own missiles to fire. The Iraqi pilots' response was immediate and predictable. Rather than pressing their attack against the strike aircraft, They turned away from the incoming American missiles and attempted to retreat toward their own territory. The MiG-25 was fast, but it wasn't maneuverable enough to effectively defeat the advanced American missiles at the range from which they had been launched. Sarah watched her radar display as her missiles guided toward their target, the sophisticated seeker heads tracking the Iraqi fighter despite its defensive maneuvers. The first missile missed, defeated by chaff and aggressive maneuvering by the Iraqi pilot. But the second missile found its mark, detonating near the enemy aircraft and causing catastrophic damage. "Splash 1," Sarah transmitted, using the standard terminology to report the destruction of an enemy aircraft. It was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life. Her first air-to-air victory in combat, achieved during only her second mission over hostile territory. Martinez's engagement was equally successful, with both of his missiles finding their target and destroying the second Iraqi fighter. The threat to the strike package was eliminated, allowing all aircraft to continue their withdrawal to Saudi airspace without further interference. The flight home provided time for Sarah to process what had just happened. In the space of less than 5 minutes, she had engaged and destroyed an enemy fighter aircraft in actual combat. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on her. She had become the first female pilot to score an air-to-air victory while flying the F-16. The post-mission celebration in the Squadron Operations Center was subdued but genuine. Combat victories were always significant achievements, but experienced pilots understood that success in air-to-air combat often depended as much on circumstances and technology as on individual skill. Still, Sarah's performance had been flawless, and her teammates were quick to acknowledge her accomplishment. "That was a textbook engagement," commented during the formal debrief. "Good radar work, proper missile employment, and smooth execution under pressure. You've proven that you can handle anything this business throws at you." Word of Sarah's air-to-air victory spread quickly through the broader coalition community at Prince Sultan. By evening, pilots from other squadrons and even different countries were stopping by to congratulate her on her success. The attention was gratifying, but also somewhat overwhelming for someone who had always preferred to let her performance speak for itself. More important than the congratulations was the way her squadron mates began to view her. The successful engagement had eliminated any lingering questions about her ability to perform in combat. She was no longer the squadron's first female pilot. She was simply one of their most effective combat aviators. The missions that followed built upon Sarah's initial success. She flew patrol missions, strike escorts, and even served as mission commander for smaller packages. Each sortie added to her experience and confidence, while reinforcing the lessons learned during training about the importance of preparation, teamwork, and constant vigilance. Her third air-to-air victory came during a mission similar to her first successful engagement. Iraqi fighters had been attempting increasingly aggressive intercepts of coalition aircraft, apparently under orders to test American resolve and response times. Sarah's formation was tasked with deterring these intercepts while maintaining the flexibility to respond if deterrence failed. The Iraqi pilots on this occasion were flying more modern aircraft and employing more sophisticated tactics than the MiG-25 Sarah had encountered previously. Her targets were MiG-29 Fulcrums, advanced fighters with modern radar systems and effective air-to-air missiles. The engagement would require all of her tactical knowledge and flying skills. The fight developed as a classic beyond visual range engagement, with both sides attempting to achieve first-shot opportunities with their radar-guided missiles. Sarah's advantage lay in her aircraft's superior radar system and more advanced missiles. But the Iraqi pilots were fighting over their own territory and had the option of retreating to the protection of surface-to-air missile systems if the engagement turned against them. Sarah fired her first missiles from maximum effective range, hopping to force the Iraqi pilots into defensive maneuvers that would disrupt their own attack plans. The tactic worked perfectly, with both enemy fighters turning away from their planned intercept course and beginning defensive maneuvering that degraded their ability to employ their own weapons. But the Iraqi pilots were more skilled than those she had faced previously. They defeated her initial missile shots with effective use of countermeasures and aggressive maneuvering, then attempted to close the distance for a more favorable engagement geometry. Sarah found herself in a dynamic fight that required constant maneuvering and split-second decision-making. The turning point came when one of the Iraqi fighters made a tactical error, turning too aggressively and losing airspeed in an attempt to gain position on Sarah's wingman. The maneuver left the enemy aircraft vulnerable for just a few seconds, but that was enough time for Sarah to achieve a firing solution and launch another missile. This time, her weapon found its target. The AMRAAM missile's advanced seeker head tracked the Iraqi fighter through its defensive maneuvers and detonated close enough to cause fatal damage to the aircraft. Sarah watched as the MiG-29 began trailing smoke and flame before disappearing from her radar scope. The second Iraqi fighter, seeing his wingman shot down, immediately disengaged and retreated toward Iraqi airspace. Sarah's flight was ordered not to pursue, allowing the surviving enemy pilot to escape, but ensuring that the threat to coalition aircraft was eliminated. The victory marked Sarah's second air-to-air kill, making her one of the most successful fighter pilots in the theater regardless of gender. More importantly, it demonstrated her ability to succeed in complex, dynamic engagements against skilled opponents flying modern equipment. Her reputation within the fighter-pilot community was now firmly established. She was invited to brief other squadrons on her tactics and techniques, and junior pilots sought her advice on air-to-air combat fundamentals. The recognition was gratifying, but Sarah remained focused on the mission and her continued development as a combat aviator. The pace of operations at Prince Sultan remained high throughout her deployment, with Sarah flying an average of 4 combat missions per week. Each sortie presented its own challenges and learning opportunities, gradually building the kind of experience base that separated truly exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. Her skills as a mission commander also continued to develop. Sarah began leading larger and more complex packages, coordinating the activities of multiple flights while making real-time tactical decisions based on changing intelligence and threat conditions. Her natural leadership abilities, combined with her proven combat effectiveness, made her a natural choice for these increased responsibilities. One particularly challenging mission involved coordinating a large strike package against multiple targets spread across southern Iraq. Sarah was responsible for managing the timing and routing of 16 aircraft from 4 different squadrons, ensuring that each element arrived at their assigned targets simultaneously while avoiding known air defense systems. The mission required her to make constant adjustments based on weather conditions, mechanical problems with individual aircraft, and changing intelligence about enemy activities. Her ability to remain calm under pressure while managing these complex variables impressed even seasoned mission commanders from other units. The successful completion of this mission marked another milestone in Sarah's development. She had demonstrated that she could handle the most challenging aspects of combat leadership while maintaining the tactical awareness and flying skills that had made her successful as an individual pilot. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah reflected on the experiences that had transformed her from a newly mission-qualified pilot into a seasoned combat veteran. She had flown 64 combat missions, scored 2 air-to-air victories, and led some of the most complex strike packages of the deployment. More importantly, she had earned the respect and trust of her fellow pilots through demonstrated competence and unwavering professionalism. The final mission of her deployment was routine in many ways, a standard patrol over southern Iraq that required constant vigilance but offered little excitement. As Sarah flew these familiar patterns over terrain she had come to know intimately, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point and the challenges that still lay ahead. She was no longer fighting to prove that women could fly fighters or handle combat operations. Those battles had been won through performance rather than words. Now she was simply another experienced combat pilot, with skills and knowledge that would be valuable regardless of where her career took her next. The landing at Prince Sultan Air Base that marked the end of her deployment was bittersweet. Sarah was ready to return home to Utah, but she would miss the intensity and clarity of purpose that characterized combat operations. Flying fighters in peacetime was rewarding, but there was something uniquely satisfying about using those skills in defense of important national objectives. As she climbed down from her F-16 for the final time at Prince Sultan, Sarah was greeted by her squadron mates who had gathered to mark the end of her deployment. The ceremony was informal but meaningful, recognizing her contributions to the squadron's success and acknowledging the historic nature of her achievements. "Mitchell," said as he presented her with a small memento from the deployment, "you've proven everything you needed to prove and then some. You're a fighter pilot, period. The fact that you're also a woman is just one more thing that makes this community stronger." The flight home to Utah provided time for Sarah to process the experiences of the past 6 months and plan for the next phase of her career. She had achieved everything she had hoped for and more, but she understood that her journey was far from over. The skills and experience gained during combat operations with the morning briefing at Hill Air Force Base carried an unusual tension that Sarah noticed immediately as she entered the secure conference room. Senior officers from the wing, squadron, and even representatives from Air Force headquarters filled seats that were normally occupied only by squadron pilots and intelligence personnel. The large displays at the front of the room showed satellite imagery and intelligence reports marked with classification levels she had rarely seen outside of combat operations. Lieutenant Colonel stood at the podium with an expression that conveyed the gravity of what was about to be discussed. Sarah had returned from her deployment to Prince Sultan 6 weeks earlier, expecting to settle into a routine of training missions and normal squadron activities. Instead, she found herself facing what appeared to be preparation for a significantly more challenging operation. "Ladies and," began, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. "What I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. Intelligence sources indicate that Iraqi forces have been attempting to reconstruct their integrated air defense network using more sophisticated equipment and tactics than we've seen previously." The briefing continued with detailed analysis of Iraqi military activities, including evidence of new surface-to-air missile systems, improved radar networks, and what appeared to be preparations for more aggressive opposition to coalition air operations. Most concerning was intelligence suggesting that Iraqi pilots had been receiving advanced training from foreign instructors and were preparing to challenge coalition air superiority more directly. "The situation has reached a point where normal enforcement operations may no longer be sufficient," explained. "We're being tasked with a series of precision strikes designed to eliminate these emerging threats before they can become fully operational. This will be significantly more challenging than the routine patrols you've been flying." Sarah studied the intelligence briefings with the same attention to detail she had applied to every mission throughout her career. But the scope and complexity of what was being planned exceeded anything she had previously encountered. The proposed operations would involve multiple waves of strikes against heavily defended targets, requiring coordination between dozens of aircraft and perfect execution under the most demanding conditions. Major Williams approached Sarah after the initial briefing with additional information that would affect her role in the upcoming operations. "Mitchell, based on your performance during the last deployment and your demonstrated leadership capabilities, you're being considered for a key role in these missions. We need someone with your combination of combat experience and tactical knowledge to serve as mission commander for one of the most challenging packages." The proposed mission was both an honor and a significant responsibility. Sarah would be leading a 16-aircraft package against a heavily defended radar complex that served as the nerve center for Iraqi air defenses in a critical sector. Success would require precise coordination, flawless execution, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions in real time while under fire. Mission planning for this operation consumed 2 full weeks, with Sarah working alongside intelligence specialists, weapons experts, and representatives from other units to develop a comprehensive attack plan. Every detail had to be considered, from the optimal approach routes that would minimize exposure to known air defense systems to contingency plans for various failure modes and unexpected complications. The target itself was formidable, a hardened facility surrounded by multiple rings of surface-to-air missile sites, protected by early warning radars, and potentially defended by fighter aircraft operating from nearby air bases. Intelligence reports suggested that the facility was also equipped with the latest electronic warfare systems designed specifically to defeat American precision-guided weapons. Sarah's attack plan reflected lessons learned from previous operations, combined with innovative tactics designed to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's defensive network. She proposed a multi-axis approach that would overwhelm the defender's ability to respond effectively while creating multiple opportunities for successful weapons delivery. The key to this mission, Sarah explained during her briefing to the wing leadership, is timing and coordination. We'll approach from 4 different directions simultaneously, forcing the defenders to divide their attention and resources. Each element will have specific responsibilities, but all must execute their portions of the plan within a narrow time window to achieve maximum effectiveness. The complexity of the mission required extensive rehearsals using advanced simulation systems that could replicate the expected threat environment with unprecedented fidelity. Sarah flew these simulated missions repeatedly, refining her tactics and timing while building confidence in her ability to lead such a complex operation successfully. Her fellow pilots, many of whom had significantly more experience than Sarah, expressed confidence in her leadership and tactical planning. Captain Martinez, who would be flying as her deputy mission commander, offered an assessment that reflected the squadron's collective opinion. "Mitchell's got the best tactical mind I've seen in years. She thinks 3 steps ahead and never loses sight of the big picture, even when things get complicated." The pre-mission preparation period also involved intensive intelligence gathering and analysis. Sarah spent hours studying satellite imagery, communications intercepts, and reports from human intelligence sources to understand every aspect of the target and its defenses. She knew that her life and the lives of 15 other pilots would depend on the accuracy of this intelligence and the soundness of her tactical plan. 3 days before the scheduled mission, intelligence analysts delivered disturbing news that would force Sarah to revise her entire approach. New satellite imagery showed that the Iraqis had moved additional surface-to-air missile systems into the target area, significantly increasing the defensive threat and potentially compromising the planned approach routes. Sarah's response to this development demonstrated the tactical flexibility that had made her successful throughout her career. Rather than simply modifying the existing plan, she proposed a completely different approach that would turn the increased defenses into an advantage for the attacking force. "We're going to use their own missiles against them," Sarah explained during an emergency planning session. "By approaching the target area in a specific sequence, we can trigger their surface-to-air missile launches in a pattern that will temporarily deplete their ready ammunition and create windows of opportunity for our strike aircraft." The revised plan was more complex and dangerous than the original, requiring precise timing and exceptional flying skills from all participants. But analysis showed that it offered the best chance of mission success while minimizing casualties among the attacking aircraft. Final mission preparation took place in the early morning hours before takeoff, with Sarah conducting detailed briefings for each element of her package. She reviewed communications procedures, weapons employment parameters, and emergency protocols with the thoroughness that characterized all professional military operations. "Remember," she concluded her final briefing, "this is what we've trained for throughout our careers. Trust your preparation, trust your wingmen, and execute the mission as briefed. We're going to hit them hard and get everyone home safely." The taxi and takeoff sequence for 16 heavily loaded F-16s was a carefully choreographed operation that required precise timing and coordination. Sarah led the formation into the dawn sky over Utah, beginning a journey that would take them back to the desert where she had first proven herself in combat. The flight to the staging area at Prince Sultan Air Base provided final preparation time, with Sarah conducting last-minute coordination with intelligence sources and confirming that all elements of her package were ready for the mission. Weather conditions were optimal, with clear skies and minimal winds that would allow for maximum precision during weapons delivery. The ingress toward Iraqi airspace began in the early afternoon, with Sarah's package approaching the target area along carefully planned routes designed to avoid known air defense systems while maintaining the element of surprise. Her formation flew at low altitude to minimize radar detection, using terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to remain undetected for as long as possible. The first indication that they had been detected came from Sarah's radar warning receiver, which began indicating Iraqi radar activity approximately 50 miles from the target. The signals were exactly what her intelligence analysts had predicted, confirming that the enemy defensive network was operating as expected and responding to the approaching threat. "All flights, we have radar activity as briefed," Sarah transmitted to her package. "Continue as planned and prepare for defensive action on my command." The Iraqi response developed according to Sarah's tactical plan, with surface-to-air missile sites activating in sequence as different elements of her package came within range. The first wave of missiles was launched at the decoy formation that Sarah had positioned to draw enemy fire away from the primary strike aircraft. Watching the enemy missiles streak past her aircraft while maintaining perfect formation discipline required extraordinary composure and trust in the tactical plan. Sarah knew that timing was critical. If her strike aircraft arrived at the target before the enemy missile systems had expended their ready ammunition, the entire mission could fail catastrophically. "Defensive maneuvers now," Sarah commanded as Iraqi missiles began targeting her own formation. The sky around her erupted in a complex ballet of maneuvering aircraft, missile trails, and electronic countermeasures, as 16 F-16s executed coordinated defensive actions while maintaining their attack formation. Sarah's own aircraft was targeted by multiple surface-to-air missiles during the approach to the target, requiring her to execute aggressive defensive maneuvers while simultaneously coordinating the actions of her entire package. Her ability to maintain situational awareness and tactical control under these extreme conditions impressed even experienced combat veterans monitoring the mission from the command center. The strike phase of the mission unfolded with the precision that characterized American military operations at their best. Each element of Sarah's package arrived at their assigned aim points within seconds of the planned timing, delivering their weapons with accuracy that exceeded all expectations. The heavily defended radar complex was systematically destroyed in a series of controlled explosions that eliminated Iraq's air defense capabilities in the region. But the mission wasn't complete with successful weapons delivery. The egress from the target area proved to be even more challenging than the ingress, as Iraqi forces responded to the attack with everything they had available. Additional surface-to-air missiles were launched, fighter aircraft scrambled from multiple air bases, and electronic jamming attempted to disrupt coalition communications and navigation systems. It was during this egress phase that Sarah faced the most challenging air-to-air engagement of her career. Intelligence reports had suggested the possibility of Iraqi fighter response, but the actual threat proved to be more serious than anyone had anticipated. 8 Iraqi fighters, including advanced MiG-29s and even 2 French-built Mirage F-1s, launched a coordinated attack against Sarah's formation. The ensuing air battle was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her previous deployments. Multiple groups of enemy fighters approached from different directions, employing sophisticated tactics that suggested extensive training and preparation. Sarah found herself managing a complex three-dimensional battle while ensuring that her strike aircraft could escape safely with their mission accomplished. All strike flights continue egress as planned, Sarah transmitted while simultaneously maneuvering to engage the lead group of Iraqi fighters. Escort flights engage targets as assigned. We're going to fight our way out of here. The air-to-air engagement that followed tested every aspect of Sarah's training and combat experience. She found herself in a series of individual dogfights while maintaining overall tactical command of a package that was under attack from multiple directions. Her ability to compartmentalize different aspects of the mission while maintaining peak performance in air-to-air combat demonstrated skills that few pilots possessed. Sarah's third air-to-air victory came during this engagement when she successfully engaged and destroyed a MiG-29 that was attempting to intercept one of her strike aircraft. The Iraqi pilot was skilled and aggressive, pressing his attack despite the presence of multiple American fighters in the area. The resulting dogfight required Sarah to use every air combat maneuvering technique she had learned while managing her aircraft's weapons and defensive systems. The decisive moment came when the Iraqi pilot made a tactical error, turning too aggressively in an attempt to achieve a firing position. The maneuver left his aircraft vulnerable for just a few seconds, but that was enough time for Sarah to achieve a firing solution and launch a close-range missile. The AIM-9 Sidewinder tracked the enemy aircraft through its defensive maneuvers and detonated close enough to cause catastrophic damage. "Splash 1 Fulcrum," Sarah transmitted as she watched the Iraqi fighter break apart and begin falling toward the desert below. But there was no time to celebrate the victory. 2 more enemy fighters were approaching, and her package still needed to reach the safety of coalition airspace. The engagement continued for another 10 minutes, with Sarah's formation fighting a running battle against determined Iraqi pilots who were clearly operating under orders to prevent the American aircraft from escaping. Sarah scored her 4th air-to-air victory during this phase, destroying a Mirage F-1 that was attempting a head-on attack against one of her wingmen. By the time Sarah's package reached the safety of Saudi airspace, they had successfully destroyed their primary target and engaged as the foundation for whatever challenges lay ahead under limitations when it came to defending freedom and projecting strength around the world.